Hi everybody. Sorry, I'm like 4 minutes late. I was having some technical difficulties. I'm gonna wait a few minutes to see who's watching. Hi everybody. Hi. Gonna wait a few minutes. Do you like my hair? I did my hair today. Last time I did a video with Heidi, my hair was like, that was like painful to watch too. Like go back and watch. It's scary doing a video by yourself. I miss my Heidi. I need my girl. Hi Heidi. Hi Michelle. Hi Karen. Karen, do you like my hair? I showered today. It's Sunday, so I showered. Hi Erin. Karen is here. So I am going to introduce myself. For those of you who don't know, I did a video earlier this week with Heidi Harper. My name is Melissa Swailes. I live in Los Angeles, California. I have 4 boys. And geez, this is really hard. Heidi makes it look so easy, but it's really hard. I am the widow of Officer David Swailes, who worked for the Los Angeles Police Department. He was a patrol officer, what they call a P2, and he was last assigned to Central Division, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, Los Angeles, it's downtown LA, Skid Row, Staples Center, Chinatown, that general area. He worked all of it, and he was with the department for a little under 10 years. He just was shy of a couple months of his tenure. David, reason I'm on here on the Honor Them website is he died by suicide in our home. Unfortunately, the day that he passed was also our youngest son's 2nd birthday. So, as I tell you about our story, my son's story, my husband's story, I might get choked up, I might cry, I might not, I don't know. I might bounce around a little bit, I might ramble. Because that day, although it's like crystal clear in my mind, the events of that day, like they ping around in my mind almost like a pinball machine. So bear with me. Also, I have a lot of nervous, anxious behaviors, if you will. I tend to make a lot of faces with my mouth. I'll kind of like go like this a lot when I'm really anxious or nervous, or I'll start scratching because it's really uncomfortable for me to talk about certain things. I'll start scratching behind my neck, or I'll start playing with my hair. So just FYI, those are the things to look for. I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it and what I remember and that day. It was a Friday. I remember I was focused with celebrating my son's 2nd birthday, our son's 2nd birthday. For those of you who are just tuning in, David and I have 4 boys. The oldest is Brandon, he's 15. The second is Travis, he's 14. Then we have Joshua, who's 8, and Matthew, who is now 3. My husband, David Swailes, died by suicide in our home about 20 months ago, exact. And that day, like I said, was a Friday. We had planned as a family to go to Disneyland to celebrate our son's birthday, and that was the plan. But that didn't happen. I had spoken to David earlier in the afternoon, about 1 o'clock. He wasn't scheduled to work that Friday. He had that evening off, but a couple days earlier, he had an episode in which his PTSD was no longer manageable. And I remember that last conversation we had. I remember him telling me that he was going to get help. He was going to go down to the station and speak to his captain, and he was going to get help. And I was relieved. I was relieved because I knew for the past 6 months or so his mental health had been deteriorating and fast. And it kind of all just came to a head that week before Matthew's birthday, and I was at my mom's at the time, and we were making a birthday cake, me and my sons, for their brother. And I, had stepped outside, like I said, to have a conversation with David, and he had told me, like I said, I might be repeating myself a lot, sorry, that he was going to go down into the station and speak to his captain and get help. And I had told him, okay, call me when you're done. Call me when you're done. Let me know how it goes. Let me know what happens, what your captain says. I was hopeful. I'm like, okay, great. It's gonna be okay. He's gonna get help. So a couple hours had gone by and I hadn't heard from him. I text messaged him, nothing. I called a few times, nothing. And that, anybody who knows David and my relationship, is not like that. Like, if I text him, that man would text back within seconds. So it was very unlikely, and I knew he wasn't doing well, and so I was really concerned when I didn't hear from him. And I let some time go, and I didn't want to be like the nervous wife, like calling the station, like, hi, is my husband down there? He's not doing well mentally, and he said he was going to come in. Just didn't really want to do that. So I'm like, I was trying to talk to myself and, be calm, be patient. It's okay. He's down there. It's going to be all right. And, focus on Matt. It's Matt's birthday. This is Matt's day. And, everything's going to be okay. And I remember singing. My mom had made a little cake for Matthew, and I was there with the boys, and I remember feeling like, gosh, David should be here. But it's okay because he's going to get help, and he'll be here for the next one. And I filmed it, which is really hard for me to watch, but I had filmed us singing Happy Birthday to Matthew. And like I said, the time was getting late, and I was concerned. We have a lot of animals, a lot of rescue pets that my husband had rescued at the house, and I hadn't heard from him still. And I just had this uneasy feeling, like I just knew something wasn't right. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I just chalked it up to it being an emotional week, but I finally, decided, I'm going to go down, I'm going to go back to the house, I'm going to leave my mom's house, I'm going to go back to our home, and I'm just going to check on the dogs, make sure they get food and water. And my oldest son was like, well, I'll go with you. And I remember the drive down there, just talking to our oldest son, telling him how, Dad wasn't doing well, and, I really needed him to step up, and I didn't know what kind of help Dad was going to need, and, just trying to prepare him for what I thought was going to happen, and having that conversation with him. And I remember pulling into the driveway and seeing his truck parked in our driveway. And I thought, okay, his truck's there. Well, maybe he took we had another car. I thought, okay, well, maybe he took his commuter car into the station. I'm just, no big deal that his truck is parked in the front. He just took another vehicle. I remember opening the front door, putting my key in and opening the front door, and it being really quiet, and thinking, well, yeah, it's going to be quiet. He's not here. He's down at the station. And I told my son, go check on the animals, go give them food and water, and I'm going to go grab something. I don't remember what I was thinking at the time, but I wanted to go grab something from my closet. So I started walking up our stairs, and we had 2 stories, and I go to reach for my bedroom door, and it's locked. And I'm like, well, why would he lock it? That's strange. I'm thinking he left and he locked our bedroom door. Like, how am I going to get in? That's strange. I'm like, why would he do that? He never did that before, so I thought that was kind of odd. But I thought, well, he's been acting odd, so, no big deal. So I yelled out down to my son. I said, can you bring me up a screwdriver? Dad locked the door, and I can't get in my room. And he's like, yeah, I'll do it in a minute. And I looked down, and I saw like some tools, ironically, a toolbox on the floor. And of course, because, my husband did all kinds of tinkering, but never cleaned up after himself. I know a lot of you wives probably watching can relate to that. So coincidentally, there was like a screwdriver right there when I needed it. And I remember sitting there, like, even now as I'm talking about it, I can feel like I was shaking. And I was like, why am I shaking? It's just locked. There's no big deal. Like, I didn't know what was behind that door. I had no idea, but I knew, like, inside that something was not right. And I remember, like, shaking as I'm unscrewing the door handle. And finally I get it open. And, this whole time my son's downstairs feeding the animals. And I open the door, and our bedroom's empty. And I breathe a sigh of relief. I'm like, oh, okay, he's not in here. He really did leave. He really, he's not here. And I started to walk towards my closet. And as I'm walking into our room, I noticed that a door to like the toilet was in a separate room in our bathroom, that door was closed. And I'm like, I looked at the door and I thought, that's strange. The door's always open. Not to be vulgar, but my husband, prior to being a police officer, was in the Navy. He was a sailor, a damage control officer for on board the USS Nimitz. And so with that being said, he had a phobia of small confined spaces, and he even going to the bathroom would always leave the door open. He just, I don't know, it was just something that stayed with him from his time in the military. And so the door to that room, to the toilet, being closed was not something normal. It wasn't natural. And I remember thinking, like, just walk past it. It's okay. Just ignore it. That kind of like internal voice inside was telling me just ignore it. But yes, thank you. It might be, I'm going to pause for a minute for those of you watching. My story and my experience is very graphic, and I don't want to upset anybody. If you're easily upset or disturbed by graphic content, I would suggest that you stop watching now. But there was a voice inside of me. It was kind of like this internal war within me to ignore the door and then to open the door, to ignore the door and open the door. And I've written about this. I feel like I'm much more eloquent in writing than I am in speaking, but something told me to open the door. And I put my hand on the doorknob and I pushed the door in, and I couldn't. was something blocking the door, and I had to with some force push it in, and I looked down on the ground to see what was blocking the door from opening, and I saw my husband's legs. And as I had pushed open the door, I had moved his legs from blocking the door, and in that moment, it was like a tidal wave of blood came rushing at me from underneath his legs. It's like his legs had created this dam, if you will, and I just, in that moment, I screamed. Nobody should ever have to see what I saw that day. I remember backing up, because I didn't want the blood to touch me. I screamed, and then I remembered my son was downstairs, and I could hear him running up the stairs, and in that minute, like, my mom instincts came over me, and I didn't want him to see. I stopped him right before he came in my room, and I don't know what he saw. I don't know if he saw it. If anything, he saw his dad's feet and he saw the blood, but I don't know that he saw what I had to see. I pushed him out of the bedroom, and I started screaming at him that I needed a phone. I needed to call 911. And it was like, what? He was screaming. What? And I said, Dad needs help. Dad needs help. Dad needs help. I finally found a phone for what seemed like forever, and called 911. And I remember sitting on the floor across from his body, waiting for the paramedics to come. I remember being on the phone with the 911 operator, and I remember her asking me to feel for a pulse, and I told her I couldn't touch him. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know if he had a pulse or not. I felt like if I touched him and if I knew, there was no going back. Like, I was sitting there and there was blood everywhere, and I'm refraining from being graphic, but my husband had gone into the bathroom and sat down on the floor, and he had taken his backup gun and he had put it up to his right temple, and he had shot himself. Later, I found out that it was right after our conversation. He sat on the phone with me, and he told me he was going to go to the station, and he had no intention of getting help. After he hung up with me, after he told me to take care of the boys and that he loved me, he walked into our bathroom and he ended his life on our son's birthday. On our baby's birthday. We were supposed to be at Disneyland. We were supposed to be celebrating. I remember sitting there waiting for the paramedics to come, and all I kept saying, I know other widows I've spoken to, we all talk about, like, what was the one thing you said when you first saw them or you first found them, for those of us that found our husbands. I remember just sitting there on the floor opposite him and just saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. And even today, like, I just think, like, I can't, like, I wake up and I think I can't do this without him. I just remember I said it over and over again, like, I can't. I screamed it. I can't. And I've had to. I don't want to. I know I can. But I really don't want to. Wow, this is like really hard. But at the same time, it's good because when I talk about it, and when I share about it, it makes me remember why I'm here and why I'm doing this. Because I know so many of you are watching are also law enforcement officers, or your dispatchers, or your fire, or your EMS, or your doctors, or your nurses, or you love somebody who does these professions, these first responder professions, and I don't want whoever's watching to be on this side sharing your story one day. I hope whoever's watching is able to find the strength that my husband couldn't find. He promised me he was going to get help and he was going to do this, and he didn't. And those of you who are still watching, you can. There's help. There was help for my husband. He just didn't take it. The Los Angeles Police Department is one of the largest departments in the country, and there's so many resources for officers. I've spoken with officers from all over the country, from large departments and small departments, who don't have the resources that Los Angeles has, and I think that's what upsets me, is there was help for him, but he was too proud, he was too scared. I don't know what it was that prevented him from seeking that help. I remember a couple days after I found him, I went up to our bedroom and I was looking for answers. I was like, why would he do this? Why would he tell me one thing and do something completely out of character? I mean, just I to this day I'm dumbfounded. And I remember looking for a note. I remember looking on our computer. What was the last thing he looked at? What was in the search? And the last thing he searched up was the number for employee assistance for LAPD. It's one of the last things he looked up. He looked up that number. But he didn't call. He didn't take that step. He didn't get the help that he needed. I remember thinking when the paramedics arrived that they were going to help him, that I was praying that he was still alive. I remember they shoved me aside to get to him, and an officer was there, and he made me go downstairs and sit on the couch, and my son was downstairs. And I looked at the officer that had responded, and I said, they're going to help him, right? They're going to help him. So the paramedics are going to be able to help him. And I remember the officer looked at me like, you stupid woman. He gave me this look of like, what is wrong with you? And I remember he said, ma'am, he's gone. Just like that. And in that moment, I lost it. That's how I was told. I knew by looking at him, but that's how I was told. An officer so indifferent to the fact that I just found my husband, 15 years, the father of our babies. I remember as soon as the officer had said that to me, Brandon was in earshot, and Brandon punched a wall. And he started screaming. And then the paramedics needed to assist him because he had ripped open his knuckles. And I remember the officer being very aggressive with him and telling him to sit down, because in that moment they didn't know what had happened. They just knew that there was a man upstairs who had a gunshot wound, and there were 2 people in the house. And so I remember he kind of forcefully had Brandon come sit down next to me on the couch and told us we needed to stay there. And I wanted to run upstairs. I wanted to run up to where my husband was, and I couldn't. He said they needed to make sure that me and my son weren't the ones that had shot my husband. And so they then, within the first few minutes of telling me that he was gone, and did a gun residue test on me and my son. And I get it. They're doing their job. They don't know. But to have your 14-year-old son sit there with his hands out and do a gun residue test while his dad is dead upstairs, and you're telling him you're doing this because you need to make sure he's not the one that shot his dad. Just think about that for a minute. Think about what that does to a 14-year-old kid. After they realized that we were not obviously responsible for the shooting, I called another LAPD wife and her husband to come over and help me, because in those moments I knew I didn't know what I needed to do. And one of my best friends came over with her husband, who worked with my husband as well. And I then had to contact my mom, who was with my other 3 boys at her house. And I didn't want to tell her over the phone, but I told her, you need to come, you need to bring the boys. And I don't know why I did that. I didn't really think it through, because I didn't really want them there, but I knew that my oldest, he needed to not be there. And so my mom came, and it seemed like time just stopped. I remember just there being so many officers and ambulances, and I remember we were just waiting and waiting, and I kept asking, what are we waiting for? What's going on? And they said, we have to wait for the coroner. We can't do anything. We have to wait for the coroner. And in that time, LAPD had sent out officers to sit with me, and a psychologist to come be with me, an officer who was going to then take care of my husband's service, a captain. I don't know. There was probably 40 plus people in my home at that point. But my main concern was my oldest son and getting him out of there. And I remember being outside when my mom pulled up with our other 3 boys in the car. And I remember telling her that David had shot himself. And I remember my mom kind of falling to the ground, and the boys were inside the car, and they were looking, and they saw all these lights, and they knew something was wrong. And I remember Matt, He's looking through the little window of my mom's car, back seat. This little boy who turned 2 today. And all I wanted to do was hold him. I opened the car door and I pulled him out and I held him. And he was just shaking. He didn't even know what was going on. He just knew something was going on, and he was just shaking. And my oldest son told his brother, Travis, and Travis just, I don't know, he just went into shock. He sat down on the curb, and I remember just him sitting there, like rocking with his heads in his hand, and our 8-year-old was still in the car, and he didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want him to know, and I just told my mom, okay, just take the boys and get them out of here. Just take them out, and don't tell Josh, don't talk about it. Just get the boys out of here. And she did, and I was so grateful for that, because they didn't need to be there. I remember the next day having to tell Josh, because he was the only one that didn't know, and Brandon was with me, so he obviously knew, and he had told Travis, and so Travis obviously knew, and Matt was too little to understand, and I didn't even know how I was going to tell Matt, but I knew I needed to sit down and tell Josh. I remember that next morning, the very next day, I was in my mom's kitchen, and my uncle was with me. He's a pastor, and I asked him to be there, and I remember sitting him down and thinking, oh my God, how do I tell this little boy that his dad's gone? But right before I prayed, I was like, God, please just give me the words that I need to say to be able to comfort him and let him know that it's going to be okay. And I remember sitting him down and telling him that Daddy had hurt himself. Daddy had hurt himself with his gun, and Daddy had died. And he looked at me, and I remember he said, "Wait a minute, Daddy died?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I want to see him." And I said, "You can't, baby. You can't." And he goes, "Well, he's with Jesus?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, like, we're Christian, so I'm gonna tell him, like, oh, Jesus is in your heart, and so that's where Dad's gonna be too. And that was the hardest conversation I've ever had to have. Just sitting down and telling my son that he wasn't gonna see his dad anymore. Everybody asks me that see me now, like, oh, how are the boys? And they're not good. I'm very honest. They're not well. They are struggling every day. Their dad was a huge part of their lives every day, and there's 4 of them, and they all have such different personalities, and they all had very different relationships with their dad, and they all are grieving in very different ways, which makes it almost impossible for me to be supportive while I'm also grieving. But our oldest, he was his dad's best friend, and so he is grieving the loss of his best friend, and he's 15 now, and he's had a lot of firsts without his dad. He started high school. He went on a first date. He's going to be driving soon. They're all struggling. We're all struggling to figure out, how do we continue on? We have, but it's been so painful. and it's been so difficult, and every day is a challenge to keep his memory alive, and that's also the reason why I'm doing this. I want his life to mean something. I want his death to be a lesson, if you will, for those who are still with us, who are struggling. I think the job, along with the fact that my husband was also a veteran, it wore on him. He did not deal with stress in a healthy way. I said earlier before that, you know, he ate his feelings. That was his kind of drug of choice, was food. He never drank, and he never, you know, used drugs or prescription or anything like that. He was like very very good man, and he his way of coping was eating, and I figured of all of the vices, that was probably the safest one. So I know a lot of officers, to deal with the work stress, you know, I've said it before, you know, drink, use prescription medication, or, you know, choose infidelity or what have you. But David didn't choose those. And he also didn't choose to speak out or ask for help or talk to a fellow officer or share what was going on. And I really believe, had he done that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I really feel that if he had reached out, if he, I mean, it doesn't even need to be like a therapist, if he had reached out to another brother, another law enforcement officer, or another military buddy, and just shared with somebody all of the demons he was facing in his head, I can't even imagine. And I can't even put my finger on what it was. And I don't think it's any one thing. I know Heidi and I have talked about this, that it's just so much. It's just so much, and you don't know when your breaking point, when you cross that threshold. You just don't know. You don't know if that next call is going to be the one that you can't deal with anymore, or it's going to be that, you know, straw that breaks that camel's back. In the months since David's death, I have struggled, and I've been very vocal on my personal page about my struggle. Finding him has now caused me significant trauma, and about 3 months after he passed, I required medical attention, and I was admitted to a facility for help. And I think, like, why couldn't he do this? I don't have a choice. I have 4 boys. I have 4 boys that I now have to raise alone. I have to raise to be men, and to teach them to do different than what their dad did. To teach them not to stuff it, to teach them to talk about it, to teach them to seek help. And I hope that's the message I leave with you guys this evening. Any of you watching, Just talk to somebody. Get help. The wonderful organization that supports this page, wearebluehelp.org, is one of many, many resources nationwide that can provide you resources or direction or help. Please do not do what my husband did. Please, please do what he couldn't do. Make that call. Ask for help. Talk about it. Wait a day. I know I hold my breath. I haven't been reading the comments because honestly, but all I see is exhale, exhale, exhale. I hold my breath a lot because it's painful and it hurts and I feel it in my body. And there's so much more to my story, but it's been an emotional couple of days for me, and I'm gonna leave you guys with just that. And I think it's a good note to leave on. That if you're struggling, ask for help. Thanks for watching, everybody. And I am okay. I know everybody gets worried when I talk about it, but I'm okay. And I know where to get help. Have a good night.